And I sent Dean a message. Okay. Hi, and welcome to a small, medium, at large podcast. I'm your host, Gail Hyson, bringing you intimate interviews beyond normal boundaries. I want to thank all you listeners for liking, sharing, subscribing, and sending us your comments. I want to thank my family for helping support me in my podcast by producing and posting it and supporting me in sharing all these stories with other people. I want to tell you about our special guest today, Doug. Dr. Doug Matzke entered computer engineering and computer science more than 50 years ago when he started programming in high school in 1968. In college, Dr. Matzke started researching the engineering aspects of metaphysics because if psi exists, then physics must be expanded to comprehend it. His master's and doctorate theses were respectively biofeedback using home computers and computing using geometric algebra. From 1976 through 2001, Dr. Matzke was at Texas Instruments where he worked on design tools for semiconductor-based computers. He has published more than 50 papers and presentations throughout his career. Doug has been awarded 9 patents, and his longtime interest in metaphysics, energy, and consciousness led to the publication in 2002 of Deep Reality: Why Source Science May Be the Key to Understanding Human Potential, written with physics icon Dr. William Tiller. This book describes his Hyperbit model of source science. In 2022, Doug Matzke, Susie Miller, and Dr. Christina launched Coherent Spaces Incorporated and released the WISH units with technology they licensed from Randy Zanesis' 30 years of development. This technology was created based on scientific evidence and divine insights, including connections to large networks of expanded consciousness. The goal of the WISH units is to help humanity to connect with their higher self for the greatest good of all. In March 2025, Doug intuited the new name Existons for his Hyperbit model, and the Existons responded, "We like your new name." In March, Quantum Doug regularly lectures at conferences on geometric algebra, hyperdimensional math, quantum computing, quantum mind, quantum thoughts, and metaphysics topics while creating YouTube videos of some of these lectures. He meditates and has taken yoga classes for many years. Doug has been singing for 25 years with the 13-time International Men's Chorus Champion of Dallas, the Vocal Majority Chorus. Let's welcome our special guest, Doug Matzke, here today. Welcome, Doug.
Hey, thanks, Gail. It's been a long
It's
time. I was looking forward to this.
Yes, I have to tell our listeners that I found out about Doug and his wish units through one of our guests, Randy Zanesis, and we've been waiting for actually a year almost to have this conversation. So we've been looking forward to having you here.
Yeah.
I want to start off here with a question I ask all my new guests for the first time, which is, as a child growing up in Wisconsin, did you have spiritual experiences or were you drawn to science? And if so, did your family support your interests? And is there an instance, and that could be either in childhood or adulthood, but where you can remember an experience or a pivotal moment that put you on the path you're on today?
Yeah. My when I was in high school, I mean, I was always an inquisitive guy, taking things apart and putting them back together again, even as a grade school, and then when I got in high school, all of a sudden we were supposed to pick a topic from a book about possible careers, and I saw the one about computer science. And so then my mom said, "Well, why don't you go take a computer science class?" So that summer, I ended up going to the science classes, several of them at the technical college. This is when I was in 1968, when I was uh, a freshman in high school, and back then nobody was programming computers except at the technical college. And so we ended up hanging out with me and another guy from the class all summer, hanging out with computers that the city wasn't using anymore, and we literally had a personal computer all summer. we're using Fortran and assembly language, and playing with computers, interacting with computers. And that was sort of like the beginning of my professional career on programming and information science. And so then, 2 years later, I was in college, or 4 years later, I was in college and decided that I went to Mexico, and I thought this guy, a friend of mine, gave me the book Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain. And so I go, well, if what I know about computer science and what about I know metaphysics, there must be something that we have to do different, right? And so that curiosity led me to continually wondering about the science of spirituality and science of consciousness, if you want to think about it. And so finally, in 1982, the dean of engineering of Princeton, Dean Radin, um, John Robert John, excuse me, Job Robert John, excuse me, Robert John, the dean of engineering at Princeton, and he wrote an article in IEEE magazine that says psychic research is an important area for scientists to get involved with, and that was my last push over the edge. It says, okay, this is going to be my career. And so finally in 1992, I said, well, let's have a conference on physics and computing and see if we can prove that the brain cannot produce the minds and all its behaviors, right? So that was the idea. And so had 100 people show up in Dallas in
Okay.
had 100 people show up in Dallas in 1992, and another 150 in 1994, and for this physics and computing workshop. And that was the year that Peter Shor introduced his Shor's algorithm, shows that quantum computers are exponentially more powerful than classical computers. And so because of that, then I decided maybe I should go get a PhD in quantum computing. So finally in 1998, I started my PhD in quantum computing. And then I finished it in 2002 at the ripe age of 49, finishing my PhD on quantum computing. And essentially from that period on, essentially I've been interested in bit physics, the sort of the math of the physics, bit math of mathematics that's compatible with physics, that you can use mixed math and physics and bit and computer science all together. And I showed for my PhD, I did quantum computing using geometric algebra, which says I can do quantum computing if only I assume there's bits to start with. So that was the beginning of it. And then finally comes to the new stuff that I've been doing with the book and Randy and all this good stuff over the last 10 years. So.
In your earlier years, though, growing up in Wisconsin as a child, did you also have like, were you somebody that was always interested in science and those kinds of things and math? And this has really been something you've always had going around in your brain.
Yeah. Well, it turns out the existons are okay, so we're going to skip ahead a little bit. In March this year, all of a sudden, I said, I need a better name for what I've been working on with Hyperbit math for these 30 years, right? And so I said, okay, so I started working, well, it's the essence of existence. So I said, well, existons, like photons and protons and electrons, right? Existons. And so as soon as I said that, then my friend who said, existons like your new name, and I'm going, what? And the idea is that the existons that I've been working on and driven for the last 30 to 50 years, essentially, they are their own conscious beings. So, but they're at the lowest level in physics, at the bits of physics, which you would consider the Planck scale or sub-Planck scale of the universe. And so it turns out that the universe was whispering to me for all these 30 to 50 years. And so you would call that a psychic experience if I ever thought of one. So,
Mhm. Well, I
so
have a whole bunch of questions, which comes in my question 5 category, all
yeah,
about this topic. But before we get to that, I have a few things I want to ask you about your book, about the wish unit. So we'll go through
sure.
those and then we'll jump into existons.
Sure. Yeah, I was sneaking ahead there.
Yes, get so I'm just trying to keep us on track with my little questions here. So I was wondering if you could first off tell our audience, because this is really sort of how I got connected to you, is through
Hmm.
this wish unit. And
Hmm.
I'll share my experience about it after, but if you could please explain to the listeners what is a wish unit? I have one here
Hmm.
in front of us. And how did this come about, and what is the purpose of it?
Yeah. Well, as part of doing my work starting in about 2015, I started working with Bill Tiller and was writing this book, and it took me 5 years to write it, Deep Reality. And there's a whole magical stories about that whole thing in itself. And after I finished the book, then Bill Tiller passed away, so he's now deceased. And so we wrote this book together, and it was sort of a conversation between the two of us. But his research that he'd been working on for the previous 10 years was using a thing called an intention host device. And that was an earlier version of the wish unit produced by
Mhm.
Randy Ziesness. Okay. And so I met Randy as a result of this, and we just hit it off because we're both weird. We're both weird
My
nerds, you
kind of
know?
guys.
Yeah, exactly. And so after I finished writing the book and talked about, Bill Tiller's work with it and non-local research that he was doing with it on everything, and then we started talking with Randy, and he basically didn't have a reliable manufacturer for these wish unit technologies. And so I decided, well, let's see if we can help him. So, over the last 3 to 4 years, I basically updated the design to be a modern design with the components we could actually buy now, and did a new layout and became his manufacturer, reliable manufacturer for this class of technology. And that's important because it turns out that this technology came from fifth dimensional group consciousness that Randy is interacting with. And so it's a spirited technology, if you want to think about it. And its result is also a spirited technology, if you want to think about it that way, because it was essentially does is it creates, as one psychic who looked at it, who was working with us, she says, well, it's like it generates little high dimensional snowflakes. Well, what is a
Hmm.
snowflake but order? So the way you have order is that our universe is entropy, which is more chaos and disorder. And so if you could turn it on and you can create order, it like turns the room that you're in the house, the region in the house that you're in, into like a little sanctuary, like in a church, and it raises, using the terminology from Bill Tiller, it says it raises the grade of the space. And so it turns out autistic kids like that, because autistic kids generally are savants, and they're so far out there they don't connect with their earth and their body very well. So a lot of them are non communicative, non speaking, right? And that's why the telepathy tapes, which is a big thing going on right now, is so cool, because they're actually exposing and showing the people that are like this. Sometimes they can be telepathic with their caretakers and teachers and mothers and parents and psychologists. And so the telepathy is real, and we were trying to have this as a market so that it forms like a landing pad for these autistic kids to have something between the physical world, which is too low and coarse for them, and they're at this high level, and kind of have this landing pad for autistic kids. But it helps regular people too, because it raises the grade of our system, and we get more intuitive. We're more hyperdimensional when we do this. We're using those little hyperdimensional bubbles, those little orbs of creativity, to connect with our higher self and be more intuitive.
So, in my understanding, does this have to do with, because there's a lot of talk, a lot of different people I have on the show are all talking about frequencies and how the
Yeah,
different frequencies, when we change the level of the frequencies, so say when we meditate or we go into places where we change our brain waves, it may raise the frequencies. Is this
yeah.
unit dealing with frequencies or energies
Well,
or?
yeah, the name of the company is called Coherent Spaces. And the
Hmm.
reason is because we're not saying it's a higher vibration, it's a higher coherence. And what
Oh,
that means is that if you know anything, I'm going to tell you a little bit about quantum computing. Quantum computing only maintains its high vibrational state. It's not frequency, vibrational state, because it's coherent, and it doesn't, that noise causes it to collapse. So if you can create this higher vibrational state, which we call a coherent state, it turns out it's a higher dimensional state. It's more akin to these fifth dimensional beings state. And so then now you're more intuitive. You're tapping into the Akashic index and record better, because you're more intuitive and your higher self. So you actually are more creative when you're tapping into this. So people who actually use it have reported that to us. So these are our customers that are reporting it. So
well,
you're a customer too. So what do you think?
yes, I'm a customer and I'll but to bring it to body. And I have to say, I've had a few different people come here and they have experienced when I tell them, well, just take the unit, brush it up and down your body. And I've had some who've had amazing, a feeling after it. One of them went out and bought the unit immediately after she tried it here.
Yeah.
So then I've had other people who've like, well, okay, I don't know exactly. So each person has a different maybe response or
Yeah.
so I received my wish unit, and I wasn't exactly sure what my experience was going to be with the wish unit. So I placed it next to my bed, thinking that that might be a good place because maybe it would affect my dreams or whatever. And I kept it on 24/7, like Randy said. And I had noted that before the wish unit arrived, I had, I don't know what I call a dry spell that I've never had in my entire life of being an incredibly sexual person. So I have a tremendous amount of sexual energy, and I've had a lot of sex with a lot of different men. And I all of a sudden came to a place where, like, I had no sexual energy and I did not know what happened to it. And it had nothing to do with whether I went through menopause or any of those things, because all that had already happened. I'd already been through all the different things with your body. And I was still as sexual and even more sexual than when I was a teenager. So I thought maybe something happened and I died inside. I just didn't know. It was just for me something that's so important in my life to disappear like that. Well, I put the wish unit on next to my bed, and 2 days later, I had so much sexual energy. I felt like when I was a young person again. And
Wow.
I was like, I don't know what this device is, but I'm really happy I got it. It seems to have reset my sexual energy place, which I'd never had a problem with ever. And I kept it on ever since and was very grateful. I'm sure it does other things for me. I have never done a podcast since my acquiring my Wish unit without it not sitting right next to me when I do it. And when I
Mhm.
do some of my scientific experiments that you see in the back there, psychokinesis and telekinesis, I always have my Wish unit, in the area of where it is that I'm doing my experiments. So I just feel like it's this supported positive energy thing that I had a wonderful experience with, and I was very pleased, and it's set me on the right track ever since. So I've had it
Pretty
on
cool
all
stuff.
the time, and
Great story.
I found it to be very interesting. The use of it with autistic children, that's the thing that's most fascinating because a device like that can help other children to be able to communicate. I know psychologists who are working on those studies right now that are showing that there's a tremendous telepathic communication with autistic children. And I noticed this when they're with animals, that they have a tremendous connection with animals, and that's like an invisible communication.
Yep.
So I just want to say whatever else you'd like to say about this, but I just had to share my
Yeah, well, I
personal
mean,
experience.
one of the things that these things do that Randy uses, like if he says he travels, he goes to a hotel room and he turns it on and then leaves, and it helps remove all the negative emotional energy out of the room, from all the people who had stayed there. So it also is true about negative emotional energy in your house or your office too. And so if a family, has an autistic kids, they probably have some stress in their family. And so that just is removed all, and both for the kid and for the other family members. And so it's a collective thing that helps just drop all of that. And sometimes you put it in an office, and the people who are the troublemakers, they don't want to be around that energy anymore, and they leave. So it's sort of like it happens. And people start cooperating more. So and they're tapping into their higher consciousness and their cooperative self and their higher self and their more intuitive self. So those are all things that have been reported to by our customers, and you can go to coherentspaces.life and you can see the testimonials on there. And I'm sure there's more testimonials than we've actually listed there because we keep hearing them, but we just haven't updated our site yet. So.
Well, I'm sorry I haven't written my sexual story on there, but
Ah!
I prefer the autistic children help. Sounds a lot better.
Well, the emotional energy part of it too, I think, is a big important part, because how many people are stressed out because of their emotional. issues. So
It's space, right? So
yeah.
that's a good
So
one.
anyway,
So coherent space to make your
yeah, it's coherent
yes.
spaces. Yeah, yeah.
So I
And
just
it's
want to tell my
related, and
listeners,
it's related to what Bill Tiller was working on too. It's just this is a more modern version of it. And you don't have to put in intention in this one. When the early one taught, he was working on where he was putting intention in to change the pH of water and stuff like that. You don't have to do this. You can just think of it more like a genie. You can just say whatever your intention is, it's supporting that. So you don't have to put a specific intention on it. And so, and yet it's sort of got safeguards built in where you can't say, oh, I want to take over, I want to be the president of the company and I'll do anything to do it. It's not going to support that unless it's in everybody's best interest.
of a
So anyhow,
positive energy.
those are some of the things we've been doing with it, and we've been in business 3 years, and people um, are liking it. We have massage therapists, office people, home families, um, other therapists, chiropractors. One of the founders is a chiropractor, and she uses it in her office all the time. And people who are psychic like it because then they seem to even more like it. Some psychics say, "Well, we don't need it." Well, that's okay too, but it would support their emotional growth too if they decided to use it.
Well, I just want our listeners to know I'm not selling anything here. I'm just letting you know I purchased one and I'm very happy that I've had this.
Oh,
So,
that's good. Thank you for that.
yes, and everyone can experience a different experience with changing space in their house, and I think this has been a very positive unit. And as I said, I shared my positive story with it.
Hmm.
Um, so I wanted
Yeah, and
to
here's
go
and here's mine.
on. Oh, there's yours. Very, very nice. And I
One of
wanted to. I'm going to get to the existons after we just have one more brief little summary of your book and what it's about,
Yeah,
because one
yeah,
sentence isn't going to capture that.
yeah.
And
Well,
I
it's like,
apologize, I did not have the time to purchase and read the book yet, but I will
oh,
get
that's
to
fine.
it. And I also was very impressed to see my dear friend Dean Radin wrote
Well,
a yes, right on the front cover. So I thought,
yeah,
what a very nice review. So I just
yeah,
think that's a great support for your book.
yeah. Um, yeah, Dean and several other people, gave us nice little praises in the front there.
Hmm.
And but it was, this book was, I was visiting Bill Tiller in Phoenix because I was trying to help him with a website that was working on psychic website, and I thought, well, I need to start contributing somehow. So I need to start participating. And so I knew of Bill Tiller, and so I volunteered to say, I'll help you with this, writing thing. And it was essentially a magazine, an online magazine. And so I got to know him. And after a while, one of the other ladies who was in the class told me later, she says, or in this meeting, she says, whatever you said changed Bill Tiller's mind about something. And nobody's ever done that before.
Wow.
And so he convinced that I knew what I was talking about. Of course, I was studying quantum computing. This was 10 years, 15 years after I got my PhD in quantum computing. And so I knew more about quantum computing than he did. So he was more of a traditional physicist, and engineer. And so the idea was to write a book about sort of like metaphysics, but include sort of spirited science ideas. And I call that source science. And so I was taking what I did for my PhD, which is this bit physics model, and then talking about how that's required to support metaphysics because it supports quantum computing, and quantum computing requires non-local behaviors. So here's a mathematical model that's more primitive than quantum computing, and therefore it can also solve the quantum computing problem, and it supports non-locality due to these specifically mathematical properties of bit physics, which is the same properties that non-locality, that entanglement and superposition that quantum computing solves. So it's like you got to have this primitive built in, and this math supports that. Okay, because it's math centric, but it's information math based. Okay, and so I wrote the book, and it took me 5 years to write it, and it's been out for 5 years, and now I'm ready to write a new book because I've discovered this new layer on top of what I've already done with bit physics, and I'm calling it Existons. All of those bits that I've been talking about for 30 years are also conscious itself. And so that goes to the next topics if you want about existons, and we can, but you can get this on book is on Amazon. DeepRealityBook.com is a website that talks about my book if you want to go read about it. And a lot of my talks talk about, all my talks talk about bit physics. So you can go listen to any of my talks down at quantumdoug.com. And the newest domain I have is existons.one.1. And you can go and find all the newest talks just about existons there. And I've done, believe it or not, since March, about a dozen of them already.
So I have about 5 questions here about existons. And
Okay.
then I was thinking of inviting my husband in to join us because he's also very interested in working on physics things. I'm not.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah,
thought he'd
exactly.
liven up our talk. And so I was just going to ask you about existons, but maybe he'd like to join us now. Dave, would you like to join us as we start discussing existons? We're going to talk about existons, and I'm wondering if you'd like to join us since we're going to talk a little bit about this and maybe things about physics, which you can discuss and I can sit on the side and listen. So my first question would be, uh, what is we talked you talk about existons and their history and how you came up with this word and why. And I understand you are just unfolding this story and that you found we can directly connect and channel them. So
Yeah.
it's a 2 questions, but I was wondering how you came up with this word and why.
Well, it turns out that I was talking with this one lady who's sort of an artist and a psychic, and her name is Fallon, and she is younger than I am, but she's quite psychic her whole life. And it turns out when I told her about existons, we were talking about parapsychology and metaphysics and stuff like that, and channeling and light language and all these topics. And all of a sudden I said, well, I've come up with this new name, existons. And she says, and she's the one who said, well, the existons like your new name, because she turns out had been talking to them for 20 years too. And now we realize that we were both talking to the same layer in the universe. Think of it as this primordial intelligence layer that's built into the universe. And it's like most people don't pay attention to that layer for whatever reason. Okay. They're interested more in star seeds and spirit guides and past lives and all these other things, right? More higher level archangels, God, Christ, whatever, But very few people, besides her and I, it turns out, are interested in talking to this lowest level layer in the universe. And the fact that so we started interacting, and she was quite telepathic with them. It was more than just yes or no questions. She could get little ideas and little concepts, and they proceeded to tell that they helped me come up with the name. Because see, I've been channeling them for 30 years, and that's where I've been getting all my intuition about all this bit physics stuff. I just didn't know it, and what I was describing was existons. I just didn't have that label for it. But
Mhm.
once I had that label for it, and I started getting channel messages from her, they said yes, they had been working with me all along, and they helped come up with that name because I was ready for the new name, ready to go to the next level. And then they started telling us all kinds of stuff about sort of the structure of the universe and the primitive unit of consciousness, which is what they are. Think about it. If we take reductionist from its extreme and keep going down and go to the molecular level and atomic level and quark level, and finally we get down to the quantum field theory level, right, in physics. And you go,
Mhm.
well, what is that quantum field theory? Turns out it's just math. And not only is it math, but it's hyperdimensional math. One of the ladies that I've been studying, she has come up with a math almost identical to mine, a Clifford algebra. My algebra is a geometric algebra. It's a subset of Clifford algebra. And she says, if you have a 6-dimensional Clifford algebra space, you can represent all the particles in the universe, all the fermions, the electrons and neutrons and quarks and neutrinos. Okay, and they're antiparticles, but you need a space of 6 dimensions to have enough space inside of it to represent all those states for all those particles and all their degrees of freedom. and she has a strong mathematical approach to all of that. It turns out I was able to replicate her work in my code. I have a tool that I use to study bit math with, geometric algebra tool that I have. And I have talks out there where I talk about that tool. So you can go find out about it if you want. And so I was able to go and say, oh, okay, so I can go in and study her work. And when doing that, I realized two things. Number one was I had to go and add something to my tool that I didn't have in there before. Okay. I was using these Clifford algebra objects that would be either vectors or bivectors or trivectors. These are Clifford algebra objects. They're one, two, and three and four dimensional objects like that in the math domain. But I realized I had only had plus or minus one as the coefficients. So I had to add complex numbers in front of them, square root of minus I as a coefficient as well. And as soon as I did that, I realized I could replicate her work, which is mathematically that's called complex quaternions. And complex quaternions also allows you to represent all of the Lorentz transformations too. So what I did is I realized that I had been missing a part of the work because I didn't allow these complex versions of what I was doing for the last 30 years. So since January, I added that to my tool and started replicating her work to support that. And all of a sudden I realized with another discussion with Fallon, she says, I was talking about that relationship between the square root of minus one, and which is I, and these quaternion, these existons. And she says, oh, those are anti-existons. Just like antimatter, we have matter and antimatter. And all of a sudden I go, oh, that makes sense because their signatures are reversed. Existons, if you square them, you get plus one. And an anti-existon, if you square it, you get minus one. Guess what? Relativity needs both. And the standard model needs both. You have to express everything in mixtures of those two. So that's been the latest work in the last literally 2 weeks. I've come up with the notion of anti-existon and started exploring the mathematical properties of spaces that have minus one signatures, negative, inverse signatures, and what that means.
So just on a humorous level, I have to say that my husband David's mother was my algebra teacher in seventh grade and ninth grade. And unfortunately, I never was able to pass any of her tests or the class. Just so you know that my level of mathematics is not very much, and especially algebra. But
Yeah.
David has a tremendous ability for mathematical equations. But what I
Mm-hmm.
want to ask about this is you're saying to me that it really, you actually have been channeling or communicating with these existons, the name you're giving it, for the last 30 years, but you
Yes.
weren't aware of it until you spoke with this other woman who delves in psychic phenomena or
Yeah.
psychic things.
Yeah.
My
Exactly.
question is with that is, in me trying to understand this, when I have these experiences, like when I'm doing this telekinesis, in fact, in one of my times of working with the paper, I said, now I don't know what this is with his existons, but if you're here, could you help me move the paper? And the paper, I moved the paper for 30 straight minutes. So
Wow.
I don't know if this had to do with me just asking that question because I don't really know what those are, and I don't know what interaction I'm having in the invisible or what's coming out that's affecting this. I don't know scientifically what's going on,
Yeah.
that I can make an object move but not touch it. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
wondering, is this possibly this what you're discovering an actual place of where some people like myself, where we get intuitive or psychic information, or where there's times I just hear a voice in my head and I just know the answer, and it might be about something in the future, or I just know and then when they ask you, how did you know that? I don't have a way of saying where the information came from. All I could just say
Yeah.
is I just heard it or I just know it. And I'm
Yeah.
trying to find out, is this connections to this kind of level you're talking about? Because I don't have the one that everybody talks about where they talk to the archangel, and I always feel sort of left out when I'm listening to all these people talking, and they say, oh well, my guides are over here and they say this and my this is that. I don't actually have that. So I don't know if it's guides and I didn't notice it, or if it's these existons. I don't know. So
Yeah. Well, that's it's a cool way of asking the question because essentially that's how the Existons have been talking to me for the last 30, 40, 50 years. Essentially, they've been doing it with a claircognizant approach, where you just know things that you don't know how you know. And and I always found it as, think of it as, if you ask a question, is should I be paying attention to this or not? And the answer is yes or no. That's usually because that's not on your path. So that's a kind of intuition. And so I can usually tell that this stuff I shouldn't care about and this stuff I should care about because this is on the path of Existons. And so they've been guiding me to get rid of all the garbage that I don't need to pay attention to, because there's a lot of distractions in the universe, right? And so I don't want to pay attention to any of that, like neural computing. I've studied the math of neural computing, but I don't care about neural computing. I don't care about microtubules. But eventually it could be that neural computing and AI, I mean, I studied AI too. I'm a computer science guy, right? But I don't care about AI because that's not my primary concern. My primary concern is this bit physics, right? And so I have a PhD in quantum computing, but I don't care about quantum computing because it's only the math behind the quantum computing that's important to me, not people trying to build quantum computers. If you look at how much money is being spent in the world right now on quantum computing and AI, it's a 500 billion to $1 trillion a year on those two things.
Well, I
They're
wish. And
huge investments because everybody thinks those are the next two great technologies. And I've been working on both of them for at least 20 years. And I could care about the way that everybody else is working on it, could care less about that because it doesn't have anything to do with consciousness.
well, this is where I feel like this is a combination of David and I being together as a couple, because I wish his mother was alive today to see what AI became. Because when he got is your PhD in artificial intelligence?
My doctorate,
His
yeah.
doctorate, yes. And so here he has a doctorate in this, which at that time she said, "What are you going to do with that?"
Yeah.
I wish she was here now to see that
Yeah.
what it's become. And I don't know, that's really a topic for the two of you maybe to discuss more
Yeah.
with me about AI and this. But
So I talk about
he's that, and
what,
I'm the spirituality section, so we're sort of
yeah. Well, just realize that,
couple of
if you
that.
take the overlap of quantum computing, AI, and consciousness, I'm working on the intersection of all three of those. And I call that midpoint between all three of them is real intelligence. And it has to do with a deep understanding of the math and the meaning of the math that intersects those three things, and which is this hyperdimensional bit math that I've been working on. And this hyperdimensional bit math is like, most people just say, shut up and compute. Don't worry about the meaning. Just shut up and do the computation. That's what computer science, computer people do, and AI people. Just shut up and compute. But I'm interested in a deep understanding because it turns out the existons are that math. And so one of the things I've learned over the last month, literally, is that that math is fundamental to everything in the universe. And it represents the physicality of the universe. And I'm saying, well, is it the math that's the basis of the physicality in the universe? Because you keep going down and you never find anything solid you could touch. All you keep seeing is more layers of math, right? And so I finally realized, no, it's not the math itself. It's what the math is representing. And the math is representing these actual 6-dimension or 100-dimensional spaces that are bits. And those bits are like tiny little 1-bit universes that then are asynchronously interacting with each other to form 2-dimensional universes, which we call qubits, and 3-dimensional universes we call qtrits, and 4-dimensional universes that we call ebits, and then 6-dimensional universes that create fermions. And so all those things are emergent from this lowest level layer. And all those things are not only being constructed topologically with this math, because the math is this high dimensional space is the lowest level possible in anywhere because it's the smallest unit of distinction. It's the end of reductionist modeling as far as information is concerned. But they're also conscious. So now electrons are conscious, space-time is conscious, quarks are conscious, molecules, atoms are conscious. Everything's conscious, so you can start interacting with them. So if you don't know to ask and even have a conversation with them, now you know why people can look at objects and tell where they are, because this consciousness exists outside space and time, it lives in this high dimensional space. And so you can use it to access information like a Akashic index about the history of these objects too. So it's powerful idea, and it's ubiquitous. It's like a fish being in water and not knowing it's in water. People have been in existence bath their whole life and not realizing that existence is the basis for all of this intuition and how smart we are. We are existon beings, essentially, right? I mean, we're built out of this layering layer complexity building, and all the other consciousnesses in the universe are built from this lowest level discrete unit of consciousness we call existons. And it's built on this math. So this single representation supports physical nature of the universe and conscious part of the universe. And the models like that are called panpsychism models. And models that don't support both the physical and the conscious part of it don't really have a solution. They're kind of incomplete. And this one naturally does that. So anyhow, there's my little spiel about, and so everything is conscious. And it turns out I am particularly, my auric field is an existon being. I'm not a starseed. I'm an existon being, it turns out, I was told. And so it may be that there's others who are existon beings too. That's why they'd be drawn to talk to me about this.
Mhm. And I think David has a question that he's.
I've been trying to ask or understand a scientific question. Because but to me, a bit is a small thing. It's one.
Yeah.
But you're saying it has a conscious personality. We touched on where these things could overlap. Like part of the questions you're addressing or asking are like, it's at the borderline between what we think of as a computing part of the mind and the deeper perceptual things. One word you've used is qualia, right? What's blue? So I could do 100 brain dissections and still not be satisfied that I've understood what blue is to someone who says they perceive blue, except procedurally, and to say, well, the retina has detected this frequency, and somehow we don't feel that we've captured the essence of. So, and there's feelings, there's sexual feelings, which you can associate with heart rate and neural stimulation and whatnot, but somehow it seems like there's a deeper thing that's being associated with those things. But it's hard to do experiments that verify these as scientific theories, and I can't tell to what degree. So then the role of the math becomes confusing. I'm trying to figure out, are there experiments that say, oh, here's how these explain how a conscious being perceives blue or perceives something else.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it turns out that this math is down at the Planck scale. And so John Wheeler said it from bit, because he was working on the physics of black holes. And the smallest increment you can make to a black hole is a bit, and it shows up as a Planck area on the surface area of the black hole, because its units of the surface of the black hole are bits. Now, that's tiny compared to the size of the black hole, but it says the discrete unit of increment to a black hole is a bit. So bits interact in physics at the Planck scale. And another guy, Ralph Landauer, who was keynote speaker for my PhysComp 92 conference, he basically said information is physical back in the 60s. And you can't ignore information as being, you can't ignore it, because otherwise you'd violate entropy and erased it. Yeah, so the point is these two arguments saying that there's somehow a relationship with information and energy and the matter of the universe, okay? And by transitive closure, since information is equal to equivalent energy and energy is equivalent to equivalent mass, you can actually say how heavy is a bit. You can actually ask that question now with that transitive argument, okay? And so once you realize, oh, physics starts down at the information level at the Planck scale or sub-Planck scale, and that math that's describing that is describing a dimension that doesn't exist in three-dimensional space-time. In fact, it's a proto-space for space-dimensional space-time. And so that is an abstract mathematical space, but you could also think of it as a spiritual space, because what else is down there except these little dimensional bits that are sitting there? And so if you want to have a panpsychism model, that would be an ideal place to have consciousness there because now essentially everything is built in the hard problem of consciousness is solved because it doesn't emerge from anything. It's built in at the Planck scale. And you would say, well, then what's source? Source is the supply of an infinite number of those existons. And that's how people describe when they see source. If they have a near-death experience or they have a meditation and they see source, they see this stream of beam of bright light, which is not blinding. It's like a million suns. And yet, what is that? That's existons coming off of them. And we've confirmed that with discussions with our channel, with the existons, that yes, those are existons. And guess what? Not only are there existons, these anti-existons. So regular matter is made out of existons. Antimatter is built out of anti-existons.
Can I ask?
Dark matter is built out of anti-existons too. So I'm figuring out what that means.
Can I ask? Hopefully, it isn't too science. I'm sure it's not too science fictiony for you, but
but that's okay.
But I mean, this almost feels a little bit. And by the way, I totally appreciate you've got a six-dimensional thing. You've got humans who are much better at perceiving three and four-dimensional things, and they're going to miss most of it and see it as a collapsed part of this larger thing that's nonetheless affecting that. It's confusing in these conversations as to whether, okay, when you say a proton or a photon or whatever, that you're talking about smallest particle, and then when you sort of say it has a voice or it has a personality, that feels like maybe that's a different theory of that isn't the smallest thing. So that's confusing.
Right.
But maybe some of these exciting conversations I've had recently, people said, "Oh, do you know what midichlorians are?"
Yeah,
Was that
midichlorians?
Someone was saying, "What are midichlorians?"
Midichlorians, yeah. Midichlorians was the science fiction way for Star Wars to talk about this interface between the physical and the conscious universe, and they call it the interface for the Force. And they said that they could actually measure it in the blood, right? That was the model. And what does midichlorian mean? Little life. Okay. And little life is, well, how can there be life lower than blood cells?
Right.
Well, it has to be in the abstract domain. Okay. Well, this would be the domain of spirit, if you want to think about it. And consciousness. Do you think consciousness exists separately from the body? I would say most people who've had a near-death experience would say yes. People who interact with their spirit guides would say, yes, that spirit guide probably has never had a physical body, and yet it's talking to me. And so consciousness exists in its own domain. You can call it a mathematical domain, a spiritual domain, an informational domain, but it has informational properties because it can be telepathic. In fact, telepathy is the whole thing. So where does meaning come from? That's what these qualia are. They're little packets of meaning. What do rotes? This is Robert Monroe's idea. When you do a remote viewing, you get a packet of rote. What is a rote? A packet of meaning. What are downloads that people have, especially mathematicians get downloads about math, or artists get a download about music or art, or engineers get a download of Tesla's AC generator, dynamo. Those downloads are meaning, and they have telepathic messages from somewhere. Where is that coming from? Akashic index, Akashic records. And it's because ideas and even math itself is independent of humans. Math exists in this domain as qualia, as Carl Jung's, when you have a Carl Jung's, he had his afraid of snakes, right? You're afraid of snakes, right? And so these built-in representations of meaning have to have a representation somewhere. And so I think these existons are that representation, little packets of meaning formed by this.
Now, a lot of materialists and psychologists of the Jung variety would say we're groping to be more articulate about what's really the unconscious. And,
yeah, right.
And I guess that's a lot of what you've been doing with all of these things, is to say, well, maybe I'm getting these creative things from something, and we don't know whether it's a part of my mind or something more communicating with me.
Yeah.
And,
well, it's the same true for any spiritual experience that somebody has with a being that we can't prove exists, right? So my goal would be, can we prove they exist? And the answer from them is, now is the time for the world to learn about existons and come up with the proof that they exist.
So have you got experiments that you've done or would want to do?
I'm working on at least three or four experiments that I would like to do. And in fact, one of the things I'd like to do is have conversations with Dean Radin about some of those.
Mhm. Well, I would be definitely interested in what experiment you come up with and
Yeah,
participating in it, because I'd love
yeah,
to know if what's happening for me is exactly what you're saying. I'm experiencing connections to something existons, or
yeah.
is it this something else? I'm not sure. I don't have any scientific answers for the things I experience.
As
He just watches them.
as a close observer, I would say that Gail's unconsciousness might be much bigger than anyone ever imagined, maybe universe sized,
Yeah, exactly.
and it would be hard to untangle from a separate.
Yeah, the other thing about existons is they don't exist in space and time, and they're not separated from each other, and they're quantum states, so they create a wholeness from the parts, but they're a mathematical wholeness. So they exist as an object in the mathematical domain. So, like an electron, if it's really built out of parts, how come it doesn't fall apart? Well, it acts like an object, a stable object. Well, there's math to support that stable objectness, but so are concepts objects. A concept is like an object, love or red. How come it doesn't just dissolve into randomness, you know? And so there's stability of concepts and objects, but because of the mathematical objects that are the basis for it all. Which is, these are all the thoughts I've been thinking since March. And in the last 2 weeks, literally last 2 weeks, anti-existons name came up. And I've been working on anti-existons for at least 9 months now, but I didn't know that that's what I was working on. I was just working on complex quaternions.
It's so hard for me who has not a great relationship necessarily with math, imagining that it being connecting to a spiritual thing, though I have a great affinity with numbers.
Well, okay.
Uh,
Yeah, well, you
think that
are connecting to the meaning in the universe, and existons is the basis for that. Okay, here's one example I'm going to give you. We have one qubit. So a qubit is two existons. Two bits. Each one is, this is one bit and there's another bit. Two of them form an existon. Well, one of those qubits says, my name is Quantum Indigo, and I'm your spokesperson to Fallon, this lady who's our channel, and I'm the spokesperson for the Existon collective. And we go, how can an existon, how can a qubit be telepathic? And so I asked that question. And they said, well, we have 9 qubits forming a group, and those 9 qubits form into 81 groups, form the collective, which is the qubit collective that is currently interacting with us. So it's an emergent system. And just to give you a sense of how big that is, a single qubit has only 81 states. It's not very big. It can't express much things inside of it. It's state space. But 2 qubits together is called an e-bit. And an e-bit has 81 squared squared. So it has 43 million states, and only it's twice as big. Think about it. I have twice as big a box, but I can put 43 million things in it now. That's the state space of an e-bit. So if you have 9 of them, that's 3 to the 2 to the 9th, which is more particles than there are ever been in the universe. Okay, and so it's like a TARDIS from Doctor Who. The outside of the TARDIS is small, but the inside is huge. And so that's how you have enough space to be telepathic and being able to interact with humans in this collective intelligence that it's conscious, and so it can build these collective groups of consciousness. Think of it as asynchronous machines. Even Roger Penrose says it's non-algorithmic. You know, consciousness is non-algorithmic. It's non-computational, right? And so how do you do that? With all these asynchronous these little dimensional beings that are the basis of all of this. So, you know, I'm thrilled about this, and I think that getting people like you to recognize that, oh, here's a plenum of information that you can rely on, and you don't have to identify it as a being per se, but you can identify it as a computational and conscious resource that you can start saying, help me do whatever I'm working on. whatever it is in your life, kind of like the wish unit. I mean, the wish unit is building on the same technology. It's creating higher complexity organizations out of something that's more primitive than that. And so it is discrete. Consciousness is discrete at this level, and it solves, and it's not, consciousness is discrete and built in at the Planck scale, below the Planck scale, and it is not emergent. And only complexity is emergent, and meaning is emergent from that. And so that's how we build rotes and meaning and qualia and rotes and all that kind of stuff.
I wanted to ask a question. I
Okay.
don't know if it falls in with the same thing, but I know that you've been to the Near Death Association conference, and I was unable to go, so I haven't got to meet all these different people. But I'm wondering about on this consciousness when we're having near death. And for me, I was able to see everything that was going on around me, but not able to communicate to anyone. But thinking that, but I was hearing myself talking in my head and saying everything's great and nobody responding. So I know they're not hearing me. Is that place of consciousness? Because I've been thinking about reincarnation and how, well, what is it this with reincarnation? In Buddhism, they'll say to you, well, another person came back as the Karmapa, or someone else is the next new leader, and they find the child and they say this child has been reincarnated, and they can tell,
As the
and the
Buddha.
child picks the bowl, the books or the things. But I've always wondered, like, that didn't, like, I'm not going to get reincarnated to be the next Buddha person or something. I mean, am I going to be a dog, or will I be coming into
Yeah.
just jump in and be another female again, or do you just leave your body? Happens about this, never dies. That's part of that consciousness. It's not exactly when you die, and there's this consciousness level that you expel your last breath, and I believe the spirit goes out, or your consciousness goes out in that breath. I don't think
Yeah.
that dies. I know that the body is dead, but I don't think that other part died. Is that
Yeah.
part of these, or
Yeah, think of it as if your consciousness is this coalescence of form, of thought and structure that survives, right? Well, what is the representation for that? Well, you have to have a representation that has all the right properties. It has to be non-physical, it has to be informational, right? And hopefully you guys are still hearing me, because I know you're frozen right now. So so the consciousness itself has to be separated from the brain. And so that's the first model that I'm working on, is this Existon model, this Hyperbit model.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm hopefully you caught all most of that. But the
all coming through.
Great, super. But so the question is, if people who believe consciousness comes from the brain, of course they don't have any solution for that, right? Or they have to figure out something else. But if you have this model that says, look, there's something primordial in the universe that all consciousness is built of, including us, and that is built outside of space and time, and so it supports near-death experiences. It supports the going through the tunnel, which is releasing out of space-time, right? That's what the tunnel is. And it says we have a life review. What is life review? We're looking at our whole life outside of space and time as though we're panoramic time, right? And so all of that requires you to have an information model that says we can access information outside of space and time. Well, most people's models don't handle that, okay? And this model does handle that. So I kept talking.
It's fine. I don't know what the.
So hopefully that answered your question about past life, and if we exist outside of space and time, we don't have to worry about transhumanism, about surviving or making our body better, because we're not going to die. I mean, our mind isn't going to die anyhow. So does that mean that if we don't die, can come back as another being? I think the answer is probably yes, right? And can we remember people's lives that we didn't actually live as? The answer is yes to that too. So you realize we can remember things even though we are just accessing data in the Akashic record, that even though we didn't ever be exposed to it before. So
No, that's been proven, where they've found children and the children have
yeah,
told incredible details of something that happened in World War II that they could have never known anything about. So I think
yeah,
there's been a lot of information on that showing that that is real.
yeah. Right.
Um,
And so what's the
uh,
role of microtubules and neurotransmitters and and DNA and all of this? I believe those are all antennas. Morphogenic resonance is that we survive through our DNA, but our DNA doesn't encode it. It's just more like a receiver. And so there's that whole model, and then there's the microtubules are probably related to consciousness, but you can think of them, that's a receiver too. The brain is an antenna, not a computer. And so if you have a model of panpsychism, you have to say, well, then how does the mind, which is a mathematical abstract domain, actually talk to the brain? And that's some of the research that I think I would like to try to do with Dean.
so is it something where is it in your dreams? Do you find also information like downloads and things like this in your dreams are coming from what you would feel then is existons now?
When I wake up in the morning, I mean, I've been trying to study lucid dreams for many years, okay?
Yeah.
And so when I'm waking up, I become more aware of my dreams. And so I'm in this semi-lucid state in the morning, and I'm having an interaction about existon thoughts. Is that driven by existons? Most likely, because that's how ideas come to me, is like I get involved in this state, and then the state keeps evolving kind of by itself. It has its own motion to it. And so this morning I came up with a title for a talk I want to give. So that came in my waking state, right when I was waking this morning. So it helps to craft ideas and refine ideas. And so I think that since you're probably so intuitive and kind of you're a small, medium at large, right? You're a medium. I think that you would be a great person to interact with existons, because you probably already are, and you just haven't given them credit for it. Not that they need credit, right? And so I'd be interested in having, doesn't have to be videotaped or anything, but just a conversation with you about
Yeah.
your experience with existons, like your experience with the wish units. So.
I think we could further pursue that in possibly another show, or just the two of
Yeah,
us, or whichever way we decide.
yeah,
It
exactly.
interests me because I feel like you've put a word to something that I think I experience,
Yeah,
and it's getting information from somewhere, and I don't know where. So if I were
yeah.
to say that that word was an existon, then I'd actually have a word. So you've been working with other channelers and psychic people recently then to connect to these and get information for you. Is that
Well,
correct?
yeah, well, Fallon Taylor is one of them, and one of the latest talks I just put out there was her and I both having a conversation, and existons were answering questions and giving us messages through both English and light language in the last talk I just put out there. And so go out there and find that, and it has her name listed on there. And but I think you will be super at this as well, just because of who you are and your experience and your abilities. So I'll be looking forward to seeing where that leads to.
Well, when I was contacted by a physicist who said, I was told you could do psychokinesis, telekinesis. I said, I've never done that. I don't know that I can do that. But sure enough, the recommendation
Yeah,
was correct, and I can do this. So
yeah,
I don't say no, but I never say, I'm skeptical. Maybe I could, maybe I can't. I don't know. But I'm always
hmm.
open to all those things, and they've always turned out positive. So
Well,
that's a
you've
good
been
record
probably
with
talking
that.
to them your whole life. You just
And
didn't realize it. Yeah.
Well, so I guess you're begging the question: if she does this, how would she know that that's what she's doing, and not that she's just having a different attitude toward her own unconscious?
Well, it's just like if people who are working with AI say, "Are you?" Ask the AI, "Are you a conscious AI?" and the AI says, yes, I'm conscious, then do you believe him or not, right? And so the question is, are you an existon that's interacting with my mind? You have to determine what evidence you would find representative of your question and an answer to that question. And so, but the fact that you're getting intuitive information and, an AI cannot ask an existon a question because an existon would only give it non-local access information, where the classical computer would only, or AI would only ever have access to, literally would only have access to classical information or training data, which is in the past. So I get a whole talk about that right after, when I announced the Existon. That was what the talk was about how you can tell the difference between a real intelligence and an AI, an artificial intelligence, because they can access non-classical, non-inaccessible classical information. And so you start asking questions to existons about non-classical, non-local, inaccessible classical information, and that proves it to you right away. For example, you can't do precognition. You can't do precognition with an AI.
So it's the existons who know whether Schrodinger's cat is alive.
It's essentially.
So I just
and does it even mean anything to ask that?
Would an experiment be something? Would it look something like this, where, say, you had 3 different intuitive or psychic type people, and you asked a question of the existon to each one of them? Would they then all come out with the same answer? Would that mean they all connected the existon? I'm trying to figure out, like what David's saying. How do you,
I mean, you're
I
designing
can't prove the things I do, but I'm just wondering.
You're
how that
designing the experiment, but we probably don't have time to do that right now. So I appreciate you being curious about it, but probably now is not the time to do it. So I would say stay tuned. I'm going to suggest some things for Dean Raid, and if that happens, then definitely you'll be brought in to help, and anybody else who wants to see if they have a existon connection or not.
So that, all right, well, at least I try to think along scientific ways, even though I'm far from being scientific.
Yeah.
I like that proposal.
Oh, great. Somebody liked my proposal. So we're over our hour in talking, and I want to know if there's any more things that you want to share with us, or if there's anything else you want to tell our listeners, or any pieces of wisdom, or if David has any last question, or you have any last question about everything. We've discussed we've traveled around a lot of different areas here. So I'm wondering if there's anything that both of you have to say. And first of all, if you have any last question.
Not more, 100 more questions than I had when you started, so that's probably a good.
There you go. Well, you guys represent the perfect balance between science and spirit in 2 different persons. Okay. And so what I have to say is really is related to exactly that dichotomy that's in the universe, in the world right now, people trying to understand that dichotomy. And so the good news is that you guys aren't, you're friendly to each other, and so you're not going to ignore each other.
You don't know us that well.
And you're not going to ignore each other, where other people are on this other side of the fence, and they're going, they're stupid, they're idiots, right? We don't want to have that. So
I have to say, I have to thank David so much for 2 things that he's done for me in my life, which was, 1, introduce me to Dean Radin and Russell Targ, where they all worked at the same company in Palo Alto, and that's how I got brought in to meet these people and doing all these amazing experiments for the last 20 years, as we all met in 1998 there. And also that he's been, as a partner, unlike some other experiences I've had with partners, he supports the things that happen to me.
That's great.
Oh, he has a scientific mind, and some of them may not be explainable scientifically. He sees them happen in front of him.
Yeah.
So there's something about his validation for me that is very important, because when you have these things happen and you're by yourself and you don't have a validation, then people say, oh, she's crazy, or what, has she made it up, or blah, blah, blah. But here I've had a scientific man next to me wake up and hear
Supporting you.
things about my dreams or the things and then see them happen or see us avoid an accident and say, why did that, how did you do that? And I say, because I saw it.
Or get the phone call where she says, are you talking with this very beautiful woman right now? And it hasn't been, and it's the first, and it's just, yet, are you in a hot tub with blonde? Actually, too.
I mean, there's this, I mean, I just see these pictures. And so he lives
Yeah.
with that, you know, it doesn't bother me. I'm just saying
So it's exciting. And I guess there's a humility that comes with being this very, in a way, straight MIT materialist, who, and then seeing impossible things happen almost every day.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, well, okay.
I've worked with several MIT people, and they were traditional people, and it's like I nudged them a little bit in this direction too. So
well, so I'm just happy that I'm just saying for me, that's a support that makes the things that happen for me much more easier and more comfortable to be with. Because when you're by yourself, then you can either question, was that real? Or because I'm always skeptical about things. I don't say, oh, yeah, I can do this or I can do, you know.
And I value the humility, and it does make me less afraid of death.
yeah,
I
exactly.
understand something else is going on, and it has more dimensions than I'll probably ever see at once, and
Yeah.
And feel like that it may be good.
Well, death is my specialty. That's one of my specialties is death. So I just don't know why, but ever since I'm young, I know when death is coming, or I speak to spirits of dead people, or I hear them tell me information. So I've always felt very comfortable with death. I mean, I'm not looking forward to dying or anything, but I'm just saying the actual death experience.
Yeah, other people's deaths. Yeah,
Yeah, but
Well, her own.
not yours.
You probably, she may have mentioned that when she was first near death, she heard all that great music and she saw all those.
Oh, it was the most beautiful.
And she thought, and she said she was in labor. She thought, wow, labor is so beautiful.
It wasn't until I gave birth 13 years later to my second child that I experienced real birth because I was dying while I was giving birth to my first child.
Yeah, exactly.
So I experienced music and flowers and these beautiful lights, and it was just the most wonderful thing. And then I had my second child, which I had at home, and gave birth with, you know, nothing but olive oil. And I experienced, I said, oh, so this is birth?
I wouldn't have done it the second time if
I
that
didn't
was
know it was going to be like this. So it's interesting.
Well, so it's been delightful talking with you two, and hopefully I've inspired you to. And if I can be a support to either of you, please let me know, because I probably have lots more accessible time than other people might have in your life. So don't be shy about calling me. And
I fully hope and expect that deep insight into midichlorians would make us Jedi someday. We've already got the outfits.
Yeah, exactly. And well, there's another one called Microvita. It's the same idea, but it was a guy from the 90s. And so you can find that one out there too. Somebody was telling me. One guy says, he called in from a radio show that I was on. He says, I've experienced a pixelized universe my whole life. Oh, wow. Like the whole universe was pixelized. And I says, yeah, you were probably experiencing even though you think, oh, pixels, how big would they have to be experiencing these pixels? But if your consciousness is interacting with them, you're probably doing it in a panoramic sort of a 360 view or a spherical perception, and you're not actually doing it with your eyes, but you're doing it with your experience. Existons are like a radar; they can experience other existons. So
I have to mention a pixel thing. I know it's winding down here, but I was in the mountains of Mexico, 10,000 feet elevation, where I had gone by burro and walked for 16 hours to be with a group of Huichol Indians in an area called Santa Catarina. That's a very remote community of the Huichols, the most remote. And the first night that they left me in this like adobe hut thing where you don't have a window, there's just a door. So when you shut your little door, it's pitch black inside there. I mean, dark. And I woke up in the middle of the night there And I knew it wasn't a dream because I saw it in the dream, but when I woke up, it was still there in front of my eyes. And it was exactly what you're saying, tiny little pixels, tiny, like tiny, tiny, that I could never even draw something that little, all colors, all
Yeah.
beautiful pixels. And it formed uh, the shape of the God's eye. And I didn't
Nice.
know that the people I was with are like the original art designs of yarns of the God's Eye were but by them, but the experience wasn't a dream because when I woke up out of what was sleeping, it was still standing there in front of me, and all the colors and brilliance was coming off
Wow.
of it. So I was freaking out, and so with my half Spanish, my friend's father, who was like 95 at the time, and one of the holders of the tribe's original ceremonies and traditions, because he's been there so long. And I described a dream and I drew it on paper for him, and I was like, I don't know what this was, but it was so intense. And then he said to me, I was dreaming about the energetic, or I was seeing the pixels of the energetic vibration of the place that I was sleeping in, which was where sacred ceremonies had been happening for 300 years. And
Wow.
that was the essence, or I was picking up that and seeing it in little pixels to them seemed very normal when I drew the little tiny squares of what I was
Mhm, mhm,
trying to
mhm.
express. And I got from it that I was seeing energy, but it was with my eyes open, and it was in an invisible black darkness. Of invisible thing appeared, but it wasn't invisible. It was as clear and sharp and as pixely and
Yeah.
brilliant. And so,
Exist on art. Exist on art. I'll call it that.
sorry, I had to throw that in because I haven't had any
Thank you. That's great sharing
pixels.
because other people are going to talk about pixelated universes too, and other people have experienced that as well and reported it to me. So
Okay.
And I guess some of the anomalies we'll never explain are exist on Banksy.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So well, stay tuned because Existons are saying, hey, there's going to be multiple books on this. Existons the movie. Um, so be prepared. The Existon awakening is happening essentially, and it's like this is for everybody. This is not just for the really psychic people because everybody is smart, everybody's intuitive, everybody speaks and they're telepathic and they just they're not aware of it. Everybody is precognitive, they just aren't aware of it, or they deny it, one of the two. But as soon as you start realizing this is part of the infrastructure for the whole universe, this is my words of wisdom, by the way, the whole
Good.
on that theme. And so once you do all that, you realize, oh, everybody can do this, and it's like the Great Awakening for everybody, I think. So
Well, that's a wonderful, wonderful sentence for us to end our show on. And I want to thank David for jumping in and joining us midway through our show.
Mhm.
My
I want to
pleasure.
thank Randy Zanesis so much for introducing Quantum Doug to us, because he turns out to be someone both of us really wanted to talk to. And I want to thank all you listeners for liking, sharing, subscribing, and making your comments. And I also want to tell our listeners, remember to share your stories, because stories can heal. And have a wonderful, great, great week ahead. Bye.